The surgical consent form was still clipped to the side of my hospital bed when I realized my mother had taken the family passport envelope with her. I remember the exact sound her heels made against the polished floor outside pre-op. Quick. Sharp. Already late for something more important than me. I was 38 years old, a certified hospital compliance auditor, and less than 2 hours away from a spinal fusion surgery that could either restore my mobility or permanently complicate it. My entire family had promised they'd be there when I woke up. Instead, they boarded a flight to Paris. What none of them knew was that Grandpa had left his brown leather ledger in my backpack the night before, and inside it was a receipt dated 17 years earlier that explained everything. You're listening to Family Revenge Stories New, where silence keeps the evidence. This channel is for the people who stopped arguing and started documenting. The ones who learned that dignity is quieter than revenge. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, or name the one person who would actually show up when things went bad. And if stories like this mean something to you, subscribe. Now let me take you back to Mercy General Hospital in Cleveland, November of 2022. The waiting room coffee smelled burnt every morning after 6 a.m. I knew because I'd spent most of October there reviewing compliance files before becoming a patient myself. That was the irony. I'd spent 12 years teaching hospitals how to prepare for emergencies while quietly ignoring my own worsening spine condition. Degenerative disc disease. The kind that made standing through an entire grocery line feel like punishment designed by committee. By then, pain had become logistical. I parked closer, sat strategically, learned which elevators in downtown buildings moved slow enough not to jolt my back. And every Sunday, without fail, Grandpa Walter drove 40 minutes to my apartment with soup containers balanced in a cardboard box that once held printer paper. Walter Green, 79, Korean War veteran, owned exactly 4 flannel shirts and a leather ledger he carried everywhere like a second pulse. The ledger mattered to him. Every expense, every loan, every promise, written in blue-black fountain pen ink, so neat it looked typeset. Paper remembers better than people, he liked saying. At the time, I thought it was just an old man's sentence. Turns out it was legal strategy. My mother, Denise, was 59 and permanently dressed like she might accidentally end up in a Vineyard commercial. Beige linen sets, expensive sunglasses, the kind of woman who referred to airport lounges as civilized travel. She loved appearances with religious intensity. My younger sister Erica inherited the same instinct, but sharpened it into performance. 32. Lifestyle influencer. White leased BMW. Filmed motivational videos in parking garages because the lighting was more honest. Neither of them liked hospitals. Hospitals interrupted aesthetics. 3 weeks before surgery, we had dinner at Erica's townhouse. I remember because she spent 30 minutes arranging charcuterie board crackers into a spiral pattern while I stood at the counter trying not to lean sideways from pain. "You'll have Mom there," Erica said finally. "And I'll come after the airport pickup." I looked up. "What airport pickup?" She froze for half a second too long. Then Denise smiled into her wine glass. "Oh, did we not mention Paris?" The room went very quiet except for the refrigerator hum. I didn't say anything immediately. Years in compliance auditing trained me not to react before information settled properly. When? I asked. "The 17th, Denise said lightly. "Just a short trip. Non-refundable package." My surgery was scheduled for the 18th. Erica waved a manicured hand. "You'll still be asleep most of the first day anyway." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was cruel, because she genuinely believed it solved the problem. Grandpa looked at me across the table and stopped eating. That was the first moment I realized something was wrong, not medically. Structurally, families reveal themselves through scheduling. A week later, I found myself sitting in pre-op physical therapy while rain crawled down the clinic windows in thin gray lines. Dr. Hassan adjusted my chart and said, "You know what hurts patients most after surgery?" I assumed he meant infection, delayed mobility, medication complications, abandonment, he said. Then he handed me a printed recovery timeline. People heal differently when they feel inconvenient. I folded the paper carefully and slid it into my bag beside Walter's ledger. That night, Grandpa came over carrying chicken noodle soup and 2 grocery bags full of frozen meals labeled with masking tape dates. "You made enough for winter," I said. "You'll need 6 weeks minimum. You planning to move in?" "If necessary." Simple as that. He placed the ledger on my kitchen counter while helping organize medication schedules. I noticed one loose receipt sticking out from the middle pages, dated 2005. He slid it back before I could read it fully. At the time, I let it go. The pain worsened fast after that. By early November, my left leg occasionally gave out without warning. One afternoon, I dropped an entire tray of compliance files in front of 3 administrators because my foot stopped responding halfway down a hallway. Nobody mentioned it afterward. Professional people often mistake silence for kindness. The night before surgery, Denise hosted what she called a little family dinner. There were candles, wine, a playlist involving too much Norah Jones, and luggage by the front door. Dusty rose Samsonite suitcases lined up like they were already emotionally checked out. "I still think you're overreacting," Erica said while scrolling flight confirmations. "It's not like you're dying." Walter stared at her for a long moment. "No," he said quietly. "Just getting cut open." Nobody answered him. That silence told me more than the sentence itself. After dinner, Grandpa helped me downstairs to my car because my back had locked again. The November air smelled metallic and cold. Before closing my passenger door, he placed the ledger into my backpack. "Hold on to this for me," he said. "Why?" "In case memory becomes necessary." Then he tapped the side pocket once and walked away. I didn't understand him yet. At 5:40 the next morning, Mercy General felt unnaturally bright. Hospitals at dawn always look like they haven't decided whether they belong to night people or morning people. Denise arrived wearing cream-colored travel clothes and carrying a passport wallet. Erica filmed a quick airport reel near the elevators while pretending not to. "Say something inspirational," she told me. I blinked at her. "I'm about to be anesthetized." She laughed like I'd delivered a line on purpose. Then boarding notifications started buzzing on both their phones. That was when I understood. Not eventually. Immediately. "You're leaving before surgery," I said. Denise adjusted her scarf. "We'll be back in 5 days. My surgeon said the first 48 hours matter. You'll have nurses." I still remember how calm I sounded. Probably because anger requires energy, and pain had already taken most of mine. What if something goes wrong? Erica shrugged. "You're at a hospital. That's literally where they handle that." Then they left. No dramatic goodbye. No fight. Just luggage wheels disappearing down polished tile. And Walter lowering himself slowly into the chair beside my bed while holding the ledger in both hands. "I'm here," he said. That sentence nearly broke me more than their absence did. Surgery lasted 6 hours. Complication with one of the vertebral screws. Excessive bleeding. Unexpected nerve inflammation. When I woke up, the room was dark except for monitor lights and Walter asleep in a chair with the ledger balanced against his chest. The nurse noticed me stirring. "He never left," she whispered. 2 days later, I developed a postoperative hematoma. Everything moved fast after that. Doctors. Imaging scans. Sharp alarms. Consent forms. I remember vomiting from pain while a resident explained emergency drainage procedures. And through all of it, Walter stayed. Meanwhile, my phone filled with photographs from Paris. Wine glasses. Street cafes. A caption from Erica reading, "Sometimes self-care means choosing joy." I stared at it from a hospital bed with drainage tubes attached to my spine. Dry humor arrived unexpectedly. At least she'd finally admitted it was about herself. By the 4th day, I counted 65 missed calls from extended relatives asking why Grandpa was causing drama by telling people the truth. Then Walter handed me 3 folded pages from the ledger. That was when everything changed. Before we keep going, pause for a second. The hardest part of betrayal is rarely the event itself. It's realizing someone calculated your absence into their plans and felt comfortable doing it. If you've ever learned exactly where you ranked in someone's priorities, tell me in the comments. And subscribe if stories like this remind you that quiet people still remember everything. Now back to it. The pages Walter gave me weren't emotional. They were financial. 17 years earlier, after my father died, Grandpa had quietly established an educational trust for me using proceeds from selling his machine shop. I never knew. The trust contained enough money to cover graduate school, emergency medical costs, and eventually a portion of a home down payment. Walter had appointed Denise as secondary administrator in case something happened to him. Over 14 years, withdrawals had been made steadily. Designer purchases, vacation deposits, lease payments, Paris included. Every entry sat there in blue-black ink beside copied transaction numbers. Dates, amounts, initials, no adjectives, no outrage, just evidence. I looked at Walter carefully. You knew? I suspected. Since when? He adjusted the ledger. Since the BMW appeared before Erica's sponsorships did. That line would have been funny anywhere else. Instead, it sounded exhausted. I spent the next 2 days documenting everything from my hospital bed. Transaction histories, trust agreements, withdrawal authorizations. As a compliance auditor, procedure calmed me. Forms made sense when people didn't. By Friday morning, I'd contacted an attorney named Miriam Cho, recommended through the Hospital Legal Assistance Network. Miriam specialized in fiduciary abuse cases. After reviewing the scanned documents, she became very quiet. Then she asked one question. Do they know you have the ledger? No. Good. The first formal step happened Monday. Temporary financial freeze on remaining trust assets, pending investigation. Notification letters sent electronically. Audit request filed. Nothing dramatic. Just paperwork entering systems that couldn't be charmed by family narratives. That afternoon, my phone exploded. Denise called 11 times. Erica posted vague social media quotes about toxic manipulation. 2 cousins suddenly remembered I existed. One voicemail lasted 6 minutes and included the phrase, misunderstanding of intent, 3 separate times. Miriam laughed softly after hearing it. Intent is irrelevant when receipts exist. 3 days later, they returned from Paris early. Not for me. For the bank meeting. The conference room smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and printer toner. Walter sat beside me holding the ledger across his lap like a closing statement. Denise entered first wearing oversized sunglasses indoors. Always performance before practicality. Erica followed carrying her phone face down for once. Miriam placed copies of transaction summaries across the table. Nobody touched them initially. Then Denise sighed dramatically. Walter, honestly, you're creating humiliation over family money. Walter looked directly at her. It wasn't family money. Silence. It was his. Erica leaned forward quickly. You can't seriously believe we stole anything. Mom handled expenses for years. Miriam slid another page forward. These withdrawals funded non-trust expenditures including luxury travel, vehicle lease payments, and personal retail accounts. Erica's face changed slightly. That was the moment certainty left her. Denise tried one final tactic. Tears. Not loud ones. Controlled ones. Strategic ones. After decades auditing internal investigations, I recognized performative distress immediately. It always arrives right before accountability. You know how hard things were after your father died? She whispered toward me. I nodded once. They were hard for me too. Then I opened the final page. The original trust letter. My father's signature sat at the bottom above one sentence. For Nathan's future medical security first. Denise stopped speaking. Across the room sat Hank Morrison, the regional trust officer assigned to mediate the review. Mid-50s. Thick glasses. War Department store ties like they'd personally offended him. Until then, he'd remained mostly procedural. Now he looked at Denise and said quietly, Mrs. Green, this account was never authorized for discretionary lifestyle spending. Simple. Flat. Fatal. No yelling followed. No dramatic confession. Just the sound of papers being stacked again. Erica stared at the table. Denise reached for her purse. And then they left. That was it. The collapse of an entire family mythology happened through documents in under 40 minutes. Sometimes consequences arrive wearing reading glasses. Before we finish, think about the Hank in your life. The unexpected witness. The person who finally looked at the facts and said, clearly, no, that isn't right. Tell me who that person was for you in the comments. And subscribe if you believe quiet truth still matters. Here's what happened after. The trust recovered about 70% of the remaining funds through negotiated repayment structures and asset liquidation. Miriam helped restructure everything under independent oversight. Denise stopped speaking to most relatives after the investigation became impossible to minimize. Erica pivoted her social media into healing journeys and moved to Arizona 6 months later. I finished physical rehabilitation slowly. 3 months after surgery, I walked 2 miles without stopping. 6 months later, I accepted a senior compliance position with a hospital network in Chicago. The raise covered more than the missing money ever could. Walter came with me for the move. Not permanently, just long enough to help unpack kitchen boxes and complain about Illinois parking. One evening, after we finished assembling a cheap bookshelf incorrectly twice, he placed the ledger on my apartment table. "You keep it now," he said. I opened the front cover. Inside, beneath decades of careful accounting, he'd added one final entry. "Presence matters more than promises." No amount beside it. Just the sentence. The last time I saw Denise in person was at a courthouse mediation hallway 8 months later. She looked smaller somehow. Not defeated. Just tired from maintaining versions of herself that required too much maintenance. We nodded politely. That was enough. A year after surgery, Walter and I sat in a park near Lake Michigan playing chess with a travel set he carried in his coat pocket. Halfway through the game, he slid one envelope across the table. Inside was the original reimbursement check from the trust recovery. And signed. "For your future," he said. I used part of it for a down payment on a condo with elevator access and heated floors, the kind my spine appreciated more than luxury vacations ever would. The rest stayed invested. Properly documented. That's the thing nobody tells you about survival. Real closure rarely sounds dramatic. Sometimes it sounds like paperwork processing correctly. Sometimes it sounds like one person staying in a hospital chair for 6 straight nights because love, unlike performance, can tolerate inconvenience. And sometimes it sounds like a leather ledger closing quietly across a kitchen table. That's my story. 65 missed calls. 3 pages of evidence. 1 ledger. 1 result. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that the people who truly love you usually arrive without cameras. Leave your thoughts below. Subscribe to Family Revenge Stories New, and remember this. The people who abandon you during the hard parts rarely expect you to survive long enough to document what happened.